First thing is there seems to have been a lot of discussion about, a lot of focus on MFJ and, other groups being involved in the campaign, and Suresh Grover having different conversations with these groups that were private. I just want to make clear that that didn't happen, and that's not accurate, and that we've known Suresh for 28 years, and those things categorically didn't happen. The campaign was born out of necessity. My mum was just working full-time at the time. Ricky was at university, I was at school. My sister was at university, my younger brother had just started secondary school. And we had lived probably, compared to the life we lead now, very much in a bubble. We hadn't really suffered overt racism. We hadn't come under the radar of the police for any of the wrong reasons. And our parents had always raised us to be law-abiding, to follow the rules. No one wakes up one morning and decides, I'm going to double up on the loss that I've already suffered in losing my son or my brother, and I'm going to make my life even more difficult, and I'm going to set up a campaign and to get justice. No one makes that decision. It was done at great personal cost to our family, who still haven't recovered. I'm not sure we ever will. We're sat here 28 years after Ricky's death. I was 17 when this happened, and I'm in my 40s, and I have my own children, and this is trauma that's going down from generation to generation. And the campaign was set up because we weren't getting the answers we deserved, and that Ricky isn't here to ask for himself. So none of this was by choice, and none of this was a conscious decision. But any suggestion that our campaign was in any way led by anybody else, or that there were others trying to have conversations in private, is just a distraction from the real issue. And the real issue is that the police spied on us, and there was no justification for it whatsoever. We led the campaign, we made the decisions. Suresh was the coordinator, but we led it. We had support from others like John McDonnell, but we led it. And we had other supporters on the periphery, but we led it all the way. And everything we did was peaceful. Like many of the other high-profile justice campaigns at the time, everything we did was peaceful. We did pickets, where we got permission to picket. We did candlelight vigils in memory of Ricky. We did petitions to the Prime Minister. We did hunger strikes. All of those things were at great personal cost to us, because we had to relive the events and tell our story openly, rawly, over and over again. No one chooses to do that. We did it because the police left us no choice, because they didn't give us the answers, and they treated us with racism, not once, not twice, but over and over again, from one investigation into the next. And so I just want to be very clear that we as families can speak for ourselves, and we did speak for ourselves. And we led those campaigns, and we continue to do so today. And any suggestion to the contrary is frankly insulting to us, I think. And those members that were originally involved in the campaign, such as Suresh, such as John McDonnell, they're still involved with us 28 years later. Now, the impact of what the police did to us has meant that we keep those we trust close. We don't trust very many people. Certainly don't trust the police, but it's very difficult to trust people and take them at face value, even if they hold themselves out to be doing things that are in our benefit. It's very difficult to do that. So you can imagine that if we trust Suresh after 28 years, that means something to us, because our trust is not something we give lightly anymore, at all. And I just want to be clear that the racism we suffered happened from the very first contact we had with the police on the day that Ricky went missing. And that polluted, contaminated everything from that date to today. So that thread has run through everything and all our experiences. And the difficulty with that is that investigation, those first 7 days before Ricky was found, anybody knows that those first 24 hours in a missing persons case is absolutely crucial. It's called the golden hours for a reason. That's when the evidence is at its strongest. That's when you're likely to find forensics, witnesses, CCTV. But the police refused to take a statement for 24 hours. They wouldn't even accept that Ricky was at risk. They wouldn't accept the racist incident had anything to do with his disappearance. And that was what we were up against. And so that meant that there was no forensics when his body was recovered. There was no forensics on his clothes. The pathologist who undertook his first post-mortem was directed to look for signs of accidental death, and that's what he did. So we were forced into the most difficult position any family could of having to commission another post-mortem on Ricky. Just when you thought his dignity couldn't be stripped away again, we were forced into a position where we had to say, sorry, Ricky, but we're going to have to put you through this again. And that post-mortem found signs of injury and defence. The police gave us back his clothes the day after his body was recovered, after the first post-mortem commissioned by the police was done. And we were told, that's it, there's no more post-mortems, it's done. So they gave us back his clothes. We washed them, I washed them. Me and my sister, who sat over there, washed his clothes, and we hung them out in the washing line. We were just a normal family. We didn't know anything about forensics, nothing at all. We didn't even know to ask the question, have you done forensics on these clothes? Why would we have had to ask that question? That was the police's role, not ours. We don't have those resources, we don't have those skills, we don't have that knowledge that the police have. So we washed his clothes. All the forensic evidence was lost. That was the police's job, not ours, and that's why campaigns like ours are set up. And that lack of analysis, we got the CCTV evidence. We obtained it. We walked the streets. Turns out during the inquest that there was a map of all the CCTV in and around Kingston, which had been collated as part of anti-terrorism efforts some years before Ricky went missing. The police didn't even know that that map, their own map, existed, which meant they didn't seize the CCTV, which meant that some CCTV, which was seized at our behest, was destroyed by the police without it ever being viewed. And we now know that that was likely to have shown quite cogent information about Ricky's last moments. That, as a family, is extremely difficult to live with, to know that we had no control over the fact that someone took Ricky's life, but the control we could and should have had in ensuring that Ricky's killers were brought to justice was taken away from us by police officers who were racist, incompetent, and more interested in spying on us than actually looking at who did this and will they do it again. And that lack of forensic analysis meant that when Ricky was found, we had very little evidence. So whereas in other cases you can revisit things like forensics, because Ricky's death was a river death and he was found in water, we simply don't have that evidence. And it's lost to us forever, and that's squarely down to the police. And we now know that they were more intent on spying on us and looking at whether my mum was crying or upset or a good public speaker than actually looking into why Ricky went into the water into the first place. I also want to be clear that we're very clear about why we were spied on. And any suggestion that there were other organisations or anything involved, it's just muddying the waters. The reality is we were targeted because everything we did was lawful. There was no public disorder related to our campaign. That's not something we believe in. You've heard that from my mum. That's how we were raised and we're still raised. That's how I raise my kids. But we stood up. And we stood up at a time when there were other families, including the Lawrences and others, who were standing up saying the Lawrence case is not actually, sadly, an exception, which is what the police would have everybody believe. It wasn't an exception, it wasn't a one-off, and it was still happening over and over again. And that was not a narrative that the police appreciated, because they were working overtime to manage their public image and show that they had learnt lessons from Lawrence. In our case and others at the time showed that in fact they hadn't. And if anything, they had doubled down on their efforts to shut down any family who called them out for being racist or incompetent, because it didn't serve their purpose. And we were spied on because we raised our voice. We were spied on because we were working with people who were peaceful, but high-profile people like Suresh Grover and John McDonnell. And we were spied on because we were working with other families. We weren't working in isolation, and thank goodness we weren't, because we wouldn't have been here today to tell you our story. We were supporting and supported by other justice campaigns and other individuals who had suffered what we had suffered, sadly, or who were supporting people who were going through what we went through at the time. And because of that, we were targeted. Because we wouldn't stay quiet, we were targeted. And because we made absolutely clear that we would not stop, and we will not stop until we get justice for Ricky, and all those others out there who are and aren't part of this inquiry, we will not stop. And because of that, we were targeted. And there was, we didn't need to link our case to the Lawrence case or other cases. It was blindingly obvious when we told our story what the parallels were. There were articles in the press at the time which said, first Lawrence, now Ricky Reel, and mentioned another high-profile case. What next? There was a huge amount of publicity around it. And the police were threatened by that. And you can see from the surveillance reports that we do have that there was absolutely no public disorder in anything we did. And so it's quite obvious to conclude that the reason we're being targeted, and as you've seen in the reports, was that they were worried that we were being supported, we were coordinated in the sense that we were supporting, families were working together. We weren't working against each other. And we've seen in the surveillance reports that the police are preoccupied with identifying divisions between family justice campaigns. That was the emphasis of so much of that surveillance. They were so interested in what banner families were working under. And that tells you everything you need to know about why they targeted our family. And it was nothing, and it was certainly not collateral, as we've seen from those reports. And the suggestion that it was collateral in 2014 was misleading, and it was insulting. And it just shows that the police will only accept they have made an error when they are forced into a position with undeniable evidence that they have made that error. And we as a family are fed up of being in that position over and over again. I'll try and keep it short, I'm very sorry. I would just say, just in conclusion, that coming here today for my mum and I, my sister's here, my dad sat at the back there, and he has suffered every step alongside my mum. It's been really difficult to come here and talk about this openly. And for everyone who's participated in this inquiry, the women who had, I'm not even sure you can call them relationships because they weren't relationships, they weren't consensual. But those women, those other environmental campaigners, individuals like Suresh and others who have come under the surveillance from working with families like ours, we've all come here at great personal cost to lay ourselves open again and again and again, and this will keep happening. But why do we do it? We don't do it because it serves our benefit. This is not going to help us understand, find out why or how Ricky died. But we're doing it because we've got responsibility, all of us have, to understand why this happened, to be clear that it's not collateral intrusion, and to make sure it doesn't happen again. Because no family deserves to go through what we did at our lowest ebb, to be spied on by the police, and then told it was collateral, and then told, well, actually, it did happen, and we're very sorry. No one deserves to do that. It's been very difficult for us to come here. And my dad, it's been very difficult for him and my mum. And it's frustrating that that officers like HN81 haven't come to give evidence. We all have health issues, we all have difficulties, we all have our own
trauma.
Yeah, trauma. But my mum lost her son, and that's not something she can get back. And yet she's here. And I would ask the inquiry to take that on board, please.